Uh, Hello.
Yes, Nusrat, yes. Just wait. Yeah, we can begin now.
Yes.
Let me introduce first. Then you will share your screen, and then you will begin. Right?
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So, dear
Yes.
friends, today we have with us Dr. Nusrat Yaqub. She's the water expert, and she has written the module number 3, which is on the policy and law aspects of the water management. So she's with us, and she will explain and experience and share her experiences on the water policy issues, particularly on the treaties and international conventions, etc. So please join us. Join join us to listen to Dr. Nusrat. Now, Dr. Nusrat, you please pick up uh, the front and now you begin. You share your screen first and then you can go ahead. Thank you. Yeah, click on the bot. Yes, now it's fine. Good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for giving me an opportunity to speak onto this topic at very first. Apart from this, as you have already introduced myself, the topic which we are going to cover today, this is navigating shared waters, transboundary conflicts, treaties, and cooperative governance. As you know that this is me, Nusrat Yaqub, and I'm a project lead at ISSR, Institute of Historical Research and Social Sciences at Sohail University. Apart from this, I'm an associate instructor at the Grassroots Institute Canada. And since 2022, I have been working with the Grassroots Institute of Canada. As we know this thing that in our previous lectures, we have heard about the complex water policy implementation framework, particularly case studies. And what we have learned, it was all about governance frameworks and stakeholders engagement, then how policy translates into action on the ground, and then factors behind successful versus failed implementation. In today's lecture, we are going to discuss about transboundary water conflicts and treaties. We know this thing that water often transcends national borders. We examine the conflicts that arise when nations compete for shared resources and the treaties and legal frameworks that enable cooperation. In this lecture, we will be exclusively focused on Southern African water treaties due to the region for being water scarce. So I would like to turn off my screen. Should I?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. By the end of these sessions, the participants and students will be able to critically analyze the complexities of transboundary water governance, specifically in the context of definition and framework, because they will be able to understand that what transboundary waters are and why their governance is a critical global issue. Then they would be able to map treaties, analyze major global and Southern African treaties that structure water cooperation, would be able to examine conflicts, explore key transboundary water conflicts and the tension driving them, then application of the strategies and their coping mechanism, specifically in the context of cooperation evaluation, strategies for resolving and preventing water disputes. What are transboundary waters? We know this thing that transboundary waters are mainly shared waters between and among the countries. Therefore, all of the freshwater resources, rivers, lakes, and aquifers are shared between two or more countries called transboundary waters. They serve as a crucial lifelines, providing drinking water, irrigation, and hydroelectric power. Why management is hard in the context of transboundary water? Although there are various reasons, but mainly due to competing national interest, growing demand and population pressure, climate change impacts, uneven distribution of resources. This is the reason that why transboundary water governance framework is complex and intricate. Due to the challenges, as we have already mentioned, that competing interest, climate change, unequal distribution, then it is important because of drinking water supply provision for household, industry, and irrigation purpose for hydropower and hydroelectricity generation. Governance needs cooperation, legal agreements, conflict resolutions, and finally the outcomes. Outcomes in the context of regional stability, sustainability, equitable water sharing. Now come on to the point that what is the basic definition of transboundary? Over the years, the definition of transboundary water has evolved primarily at very first in 1966. International Law Association defined transboundary waters are water resources that flow across or form international boundaries, necessitating coordinated policies and governance frameworks for fair, sustainable utilization. After that, United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, UNECE, in 1992 defined transboundary water as a surface or groundwater resources that mark, cross, or lie on boundaries between two or more countries, requiring cooperation for sustainable management. After that, in 1997, United Nations Water Course Convention once again defined a system of surface and underground waters constituting a unitary whole flowing to a common terminus shared by two or more states. Recently, the Global Water Partnership defined the transboundary waters. A freshwater system, rivers, lakes, and groundwater are shared between countries, requiring multilateral governance for allocation, quality, and ecosystem preservation. So, why transboundary treaties matter? As water scarcity intensifies due to climate change, population growth, and economic development, international agreements serve as essential framework for sustainable and equitable water distribution in the context of legal principle. Because transboundary water treaties develop legal principle that are established binding norms for equitable, reasonable use of shared waters. Apart from this, governance structure and its framework. Because transboundary water treaties create commissions and bodies for ongoing joint management. Finally, the most important, for dispute resolution. Because transboundary water treaties and agreement provides mechanism for mediation, arbitration before the tension escalates. Although there are so many treaties, but soon after the commencement of United Nations in 1945, in 1960, World Bank first time brokered the treaty, and it was called Indus Water Treaty between Pakistan and India. The treaty allocates three eastern rivers to India: Satluj, Ravi, and Beas, and the western rivers Indus, Jhelum, and Chenab to Pakistan. Includes a permanent Indus Commission for dispute resolution in force. The treaty is in force over 6 decades, despite periodic tension. However, recently the Indian government has halted the treaty, which is a clear violation of Article 12 of 1916 Indus Water Treaty, which dictates that a single member country cannot unilaterally halt, terminate, or suspend the pact. Specifically, Article 12, paragraph 4, eliminates any unilateral exit or a halt mechanism by stating that The provision of this treaty shall continue in force until terminated by a duly ratified treaty concluded for that purpose between the two governments. Because Indus Water Treaty is a precedent for many of the treaties which lately developed. So any of the intervention in terms to halt the treaty definitely would affect other agreements around the globe. Nile Basin Initiative is another a historic agreement. It was established as a cooperative framework among 10 riparian countries: Burundi, DR Congo, Egypt, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Kenya, Rwanda, South Sudan, Tanzania, and Uganda. Its primary objective includes equitable water utilization, regional economic development, and environmental sustainability. The initiative promotes dialogue and joint investment projects to balance the competing interests of upstream and downstream nations. However, disagreements persist, particularly regarding Ethiopia's Grand Renaissance Dam and its impact on Egypt and Sudan. Beside these two main treaties, we have many others. Mekong River Agreement, which was signed in 1995 among the countries Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam. The treaty was established the Mekong River Commission for Sustainable Water Management. Rising hydropower activity upstream China, Laos strains downstream agriculture and fisheries. The treaty is very much important. Still, the Mekong River crisis is ongoing, and many of the studies and many of the papers have been published onto this issue. Because primarily the treaty was established, or this agreement was established to promote sustainable water management and cooperative development of the Mekong River Basin. The agreement provides guidelines for dam construction, irrigation, and water quality management, aiming to prevent disputes over water usage. However, increasing hydropower projects, particularly in China and Laos, have created tension over water flow and sediment transport, affecting downstream agriculture and fishing communities. It ultimately disrupt the livelihood of Laos. It ultimately affect the livelihood of the downstream nations. Then we have a Colorado River Compact. It was primarily signed in 1922 among the 7 US states. Lately, it extended in 1944, and Mexico came into this agreement. The objective was to increase 1.5 million acre-feet water allocation for Mexico. The treaty has been instrumental in regulating water distribution. However, challenges such as droughts, over-extraction, and climate change have strained the agreement, necessitating periodic negotiations. Then we have a Helsinki Rules. This is the International Law Association rule developed in 1966. Although this is a legal document or legal agreement, but this is non-binding, but highly influential legal framework for equitable water sharing. It shaped the United Nations 1997 Water Course Convention, a principle for fair use and no harm prevention. This is a global timeline of water treaties. We know this thing that Colorado River Compact was signed in 1922 and 1994. It laid the foundation of transboundary water treaties and agreements. The prime objective of this compact was water allocation and drought management. Then Indus Water Treaty, the main objective of this treaty was water allocation and conflict resolution. Then we have a Helsinki Rule, which came into force soon after the Indus Water Treaty in 1966, and it aimed equitable and reasonable water sharing. Then we have a Mekong River Agreement in 1995 among the countries of Asia Pacific, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam. Objective was sustainable basin management. Then we have a Nile Basin Initiative in 1999. Objective was equitable water use and regional cooperation. Then there are three major water agreements in different countries of Southern Africa. First, we have ORESCOM. It was signed in 2000. Countries were Botswana, Lesotho, Namibia, South Africa. Objective of the agreement was cooperation and environmental sustainability. Then we have a LIMCOM in 2003. Objective was flood management and sustainable use. ZIMCOM recently signed in 2011. Objective was integrated water resource management. Southern African Transboundary Treaties. We know this thing that South Africa is the region of the world which is most water scarce. And many of the countries, despite having so many river basins, but they are still struggling for water availability due to a long drought and arid region. Due to being in an arid region, therefore, Southern Africa's shared river basins are vital for regional water security, economic activity, and ecosystem sustainability, governed through dedicated river basin commissions. ORESCOM, Orange Sanku River Commission, it was established in 2000, and the parties and countries were Botswana, Lesotho, Namibia, South Africa. Objective was water allocation, environmental sustainability, hydropower development, mechanism for data sharing, monitoring, and stakeholders engagement. Then we have a ZEMCOM, Zimbabwe Watercourse Commission, and the parties were Angola, Botswana, Malawi, Mozambique, Namibia, Tanzania, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. Objective was to promote integrated water resource management and joint decision-making on dams, irrigation, and hydropower. LIMCOM, Limpopo Watercourse Commission, 2003. Parties were South Africa, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and objective was to develop joint management and dispute resolution, sustainable water use, flood management, cross-border cooperation. Although that we have discussed the Southern African water treaties, but apart from this, we have some other water treaties which need to be discussed separately and in detail. First of all is Israel-Palestine on Jordan River and mountain aquifer. We know this thing that water remains a major point of contention in the Israel-Palestine conflict, particularly regarding access to the Jordan River and the mountain aquifer. Israel controls a significant share of these resources, while the Palestinian territories face water shortage. The unequal distribution of water resources has exacerbated socio-economic disparities and heightened political tensions. Israel's controls over water infrastructure and restrictions on Palestinian water development projects further complicate negotiations. Various international organizations, including the United Nations, have attempted to mediate water sharing agreements, but political instability continues to hinder progress. Then we have a Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, Nile Basin, as we have already talked about in Nile Initiative. Basically, Ethiopia's construction of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam on the Blue Nile has sparked a geopolitical conflict with downstream countries, particularly Egypt and Sudan. Egypt, which relies on Nile River for 90% of its freshwater needs, fears that the dam will reduce water flow and threaten agriculture productivity. Sudan has expressed mixed concerns, benefiting from potential hydropower generations, but also fearing water supply disruptions. Despite years of diplomatic negotiations, including African Union and United Nations, mediation, a binding agreement on dam operations and water release schedule remain elusive. Then we have a Aral Sea disaster, which is because of Amur River and Sire River in Central Asia. Once the fourth largest inland water body has drastically shrunk due to excessive water diversions from the Amur River and Sire rivers for large-scale irrigation projects. This environmental disaster has led to severe economic and social consequences in Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan. The drying of the Aral Sea has resulted in desertification, loss of fisheries, health crisis due to dust storms, and strained relations between upstream and downstream nations. Efforts to revive the Aral Sea include international fundings and regional cooperation, but water competition remains a significant challenge in this region. Now, come on to the point, Southern African transboundary water conflicts. We know this thing that Southern Africa faces multiple transboundary water disputes due to shared river systems, hydropower demands, and competing agriculture needs. This is the reason that why several regional disputes are continuously arising, specifically in the context of the Inkomati and Mupato River, which is a continuous dispute, and the parties are South Africa, Mozambique, and Eswatini. These rivers are critical for agriculture, drinking water, and industry. The tripartite interim agreement governs fair allocation amid differing national priorities. Then we have our Kinone rivers, and the parties are Angola and Namibia. Namibia's proposed hydropower dams and diversion schemes raise Angolan concerns over ecological and social impact on downstream communities. Zimbabwe River Basin, and the parties are Zambia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Malawi. Over 40 million people which are residing in these river basins are continuously facing the severe droughts and water scarcity. This is the reason that hydropower. This is the reason that continuous disputes over water extraction and dam operation, specifically in the context of Karaba Dam and conservation, persist despite ZAMCOM's cooperative mandate. This is a glimpse of maps that how in a MENA region and in Africa region, water conflicts are arising, and they are a continuous phenomena in this region. Conflict resolution and cooperative strategies. Managing transboundary water conflicts effectively means moving beyond rigid legalities to shared human and ecological treaties, realities of a connected river basins. A diverse toolkit of diplomatic, legal, and institutional strategies has evolved to balance competing national interests with the needs for sustainable use. Strengthen regional cooperation. In African region, we see this thing that the water commissions mainly aimed to increase the resilience of the institutions like ORESCOM, ZIMCOM, and LIMCOM. Water commissions give riparian states a reliable space to negotiate to negotiate and to keep continue their discussions and their possible solutions, that what can they figure out to solve their issues. Integrated water resource management, these kind of cooperative and coping mechanism and strategies which we develop while signing a transboundary water agreements, they treats water governance holistically, balancing social equity, economic growth, and environmental health. Third-party mediation and legal frameworks. Definitely, transboundary water treaties, agreements, and development of commission provides neutral actors to came into the story, like United Nations, World Bank, African Union, and International Court of Justice apply the Helsinki rules and United Nations Water Course Convention to solve the disputes among and between the countries. This is a cyclical framework for resilient governance. There are 3 levels: level 1, level 2, and level 3. In level 1, which is all about institutional pillars at macro level, because it aims to strengthen regional cooperation, joint platform for collaborative decision making. SAVI, South Asia Water Initiative is an example of this institutional pillars. The forum provides South Asian countries to talk about their water disputes and to make a way forward. In the context of Africa region, definitely ORESCOM, ZIMCOM, and LIMCOM are the examples of these kind of river commissions. Third party mediation and legal framework, external arbitration via United Nations, World Bank, African Union, International Court of Justice. Provides legal basis, specifically Helsinki rules, which is non-binding agreement, and lately United Nations Water Course Convention 1992 and 1997 provides equitable and reasonable utilization. Then we have a level 3 operational framework and systems. Integrated water resource management provides holistic approach with social equity, economic growth, environmental health, stakeholders, and government engagement, inclusive stakeholders and government engagement, industries and communities presence as well. Apart from this, data sharing is also a part of level 2, because data sharing and transparency is something which always builds a trust. So open information exchange, joint monitoring for real-time water flow and climate metrics, example, Mekong River Commission collaboration system. This is the reason that data sharing is something which build trust. The Mekong River Commission exemplifies this. Level 3, grounded strategies, implementation, community involvement, bottom-up approaches with local farmers, indigenous groups, climate adaptation, resilient infrastructure, water efficient technologies, rainwater harvesting. These all of things are quite important because bottom-up approaches involving local farmers and communities ensure agreements are realistic and durable. Climate change adaptation, water use efficient, water use to calculate water use efficiency, technology, resilient infrastructure, and rainwater harvesting, reduce dependency on contested flows. This is a final slide of this lecture, but this is a quite very important, but these are very important points because transboundary water conflicts persist not because we lack treaties, but because of underlying power imbalances, political friction, and weak enforcement. Because transboundary water demands collaborative governance across borders, not unilateral control. Treaties like the Indus Water Treaty and ZEMCOM shows cooperation is achievable and durable. Conflicts from Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam to the Aral Sea reveals that legal text alone cannot resolve power asymmetries. Transparent data, community engagement, and climate-resilient institutions turns river from friction point into bridges for regional stability. Thank you very much, and we will be welcome to your questions and discussion onto the forum.
Okay, thank you, Nusrat. It was very interesting, very nice lecture. Okay, thank you
Yes.
for your contribution. I think the students will interact with you. They all know your profile is there on the portal, and they can interact with you. They can write to you. This video will be placed on the portal by tomorrow. Thank you for your contribution once again. So have a good time. You want to say something? If you can say. Otherwise, we can close this session.
It was a very nice to discuss the topic because I think so not only to the participants and students, but for also the mentors and the teachers which are preparing lecture on to this topic. They are also learning from these all of these things. Because I have seen the forum, I have seen the people's response onto the forum, and the response is quite good, and I'm hopeful that we will be able to interact on transboundary water conflicts and treaties. That why it is important, because when we talk about the water governance, then transboundary water agreements always are on top of the line. So definitely, it would be a great to communicate with the students on there today. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you. Please close this slide. Close the share. Yes. Okay. Take care, please. Thank you. I just close this session now.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Allah Hafiz.
Okay.